by date. Now, thank you. Yep. Modern logistics just in time.
I love your paper.
Easy first.
See how this goes. Good morning. It's now time for IETF 104 Sidrops. If you're here for Sidrops, that's terrific. If you're not, it might be fun. I'm Chris. This is Kayer. We're your chairs. If you're presenting today, mic like this, not like this. Stand on X. Okay. Note well. Everybody brought their binoculars. Good. Here's our agenda. We have 2 hours, so 10 minutes is a bit fungible, but it always is. Questions? Comments? Question? Yes. I don't have you on there. Did you send me slides? Mother. Okay, well, we'll fix that in post. Okay, so we have some drafts. We have one that's in the editor's queue, rollover. There's 4 that are in processing. The one with the star LTA use cases had a little bit of extra fun and may have some more fun when it gets to IETF last call. We'll see. And then these last 3 are still working through the process. If you are an editor or author on one of those last 3 and you think it's ready to go, you should definitely email the list and say, I think this should be sent to working group adoption, or sorry, working group last call. All right, no questions? Good. Okay, slides. So now, is there a Daniel in the room with slides? Do you have slides? God, what? No, you didn't. Let's see if we have your slides then. Oh, you know what? I think I might.
Maybe it wasn't a standard way to send you the slides.
I don't know. None of these looks like yours? None of those looks like yours?
No. I put my name in the slides. So.
Terrific.
Email?
Why don't we skip ahead to the next person while I find his slides?
Okay.
Randy Bush.
Randy Bush, IAJ.
Okie doke. This one flew around a while ago. We had some discussion, and I'm just trying to summarize where we are today. Oh, great. Chris?
Wait. Oh. Try now? No.
There we go. For the moment, let's use a term of evaluator, which is an origin validation device. So it gets BGP data, it gets ROVs in the term of whatever we called them once we've thrown away the crypto, I forget. And it signals the validity, it signals only invalid announcement back to the devices which sent the invalid BGP announcements. Okay, so that the device can drop invalids. The idea here is better scale out. okay? So that all the devices in the POP do not have to have origin validation code. They also don't have to load the RPKI cache. It can also make the whole POP more consistent in terms of the validation state, so you don't get excitement with stuff going around. It's kind of like route reflectors. Okay? And to emphasize again, you are inside a trust domain. You are not outsourcing trust, right? It's all under your control. So do not share with customers or friends. Okay. The devices send BGP. Maybe they could send BMP to the evaluator if BMP actually worked on the routers we have. But for the moment, let's restrict the way we think about it to BGP. Okay. BMP would probably be better choice if we could choose it. The discussion on list was essentially how do we signal back from the evaluator to the BGP speaker. And there were 3 alternatives on list, and I've thrown a 4th in just to be annoying. The draft as it stands uses in-band. Okay, the evaluator sends the announcement it received as it received it, path and all, with a community tag back to the BGP speaker. Okay. Or it could be a new AFI-SAFI. Or it could be some hack like the RPKI to router protocol. Or it could be a whole new protocol. Okay. If it was the in-band, as in the draft, sends it, it's just BGP forward and back, those special protocol. Right? Probably the simplest and stupid, which is why I chose it, being simple and stupid myself. You tag it with the prefix origin validation state extended community back from 8097. Now, this does not mean I'm in love with 8097. Okay, in fact, I objected to it in last calls. Okay, because I don't want the router doing things for me magically. But it did well define a community to signal state. And so we could reuse that. Or you could find some other way to color the announcement. Some other community, God help us, an attribute, whatever. And the originator of the BGP announcement, when she hears back that it was invalid, presumably drops it. Okay. A new AFI-SAFI could return invalid announcements back to the sender with an AFI-SAFI specifically for this. It could contain more granular info about why it was invalid. Oliver kind of likes this. And the originator drops the path, of course, but a new AFI-SAFI is a lot of implementation, which is why it's not what the draft is suggesting. Hack up our PKI router further, add one or more PDUs. 6810 is not the right RFC anymore, is it? Whatever it's called now. Ask one of the authors. Ask a different one of the authors. So we have the RPKI router protocol. If so, why doesn't the router just use it and evaluate it? But whatever. The evaluator acts the role of the cache and signals invalid paths back, and guess what? We could create a whole new protocol. Let's not go there. All these have good and bad points. None are perfect. None of it is really simple and stupid enough, but if you want to do this, it'd be really, really useful to have something in this space. So the way the draft stands today is in-band marking with the extended community. Love to hear people's opinions, etc. And that's the story.
Sriram, NIST, does the router still do a validation, or it's only the evaluator that must do the validation?
Sorry you missed the beginning.
Oh.
It's the evaluator.
Yeah, I read through your slides. So it is only the evaluator can do it. The router must not do it?
It doesn't make much sense for the router to do it. That's why it's outsourcing it to the evaluator.
Okay. My question was, does the draft require that it must be done only at the evaluator?
I don't think the draft bothered saying that.
Okay. So, fine. I mean, do you intend to go that way, or do you intend to
I
keep it
don't
open
think
for the
it's
router?
necessary to say that do not evaluate, do not run the router underwater.
Okay. So the next question, if that's the case, the next question is if the evaluator is not doing it for whatever reason because of because it lost RPKI connectivity or something, how does it signal to the router about about the fact that it is not doing evaluation anymore at this point of time?
The draft does not cover that.
Should it?
Maybe. George, you heading for a microphone? That's a shame. Thank you.
Daniel.
Still not there? No, it's
So I'm here with signaling prefix origin validation results from FQI to other BGP speakers. I'm one of the co-authors. Others are from AMSIX, I'm from DKIX, and one is from FranceIX. This draft has been a while at the IETF, like now it's 3 years, something like that. And I just would like to just give a recap and show you what it is about. So the main idea of this draft was in the domain of an IXP network to forward the validation result from the route server, which is doing RPKI validation within community to the peers. So this is in the domain of an IXP, so it's a little bit complicated. It's external BGP, but it's a kind of trusted domain, I would say. This was always a discussion point here. So why we would like to do it? We see it as a lightweight method to do RPKI validation. So people can use it at the IXP for dropping invalids. Maybe if routers can't do it themselves, it's like a backward compatibility. Or for monitoring, maintenance, troubleshooting, or research or educational purposes. So there might be a variety of things to do. Even if the route server is dropping RPKI by default, it might still be useful. So the way it works is we have these networks B, C, D. They are all connected to the IXP. The route server is receiving routes from peers, doing RPKI validation, and forwarding like the announcement to other peers and tagging the validation result with the community to these peers. So it should not cross the border from, say, C to Y. It should stay at the IXP, at this community. The current implementation for the community that was also discussed on the mailing list is now that we have a transitive 4-octet AS-specific extended community. Before we had the same like 1897, and but because the IXP is technically an external BGP community, the discussant said that we have to use this one, which also has to be transitive. We don't want to be transitive, but for the domain of an IXP, I was said we have to use this one. So in this community, we have the AS that is doing the prefix validation, which would be the IXP, the route server, and we have the validation state. And in the development of the draft, we also came up with, it was more tailored to IXPs, so we came up with different modes of operation, which are basically the things you can think of that could run at the route server. You could either, when the route server is forwarding the prefixes, you could either just tag everything, don't do anything with the states you have, like keep invalids and everything and just forward everything by just tagging it, and the peer can do what it wants. Then you can drop invalid prefixes. That would be the case if you say we want to have drop invalids at IXP by default and still forwarding the unknowns and the valid routes, but also tagging them. And you can also drop invalids and unknowns and just forward the valid ones. So, I mean, you could also think about doing this by having a customer portal and you say, I want to have that mode. Like default mode could be mode 2, drop invalids, and you could also say there's something wrong. I want to have all prefixes and say what it is. And do troubleshooting. A rough timeline to understand where this draft is coming from. Before I was born to IETF, this draft, like the idea of this, tried to hitchhike with this 8079, which was also Randy talking about. But this one is only for internal BGP. So we tried to also get the external stuff in there, but it was too late. It was already last call. So an own version of the draft was born, which was basically just the same, but replaced the I of BGP with the E of BGP and was external BGP. Then it was tailored to IXPs. These modes of operations were added. And the last thing that happened, the major last thing, was we swapped the community that the draft, the RFC 8079 used with the external prefix origin validation that is also okay for external BGP. And this is also some while ago, I think almost a year. Meanwhile, we had like a discussion on the mailing list half a year. I think we implemented the most technical things. There was also a lot of political discussion going on. And meanwhile, the RPKI adoption is continuing. Invalids are being dropped by default at different networks. But I still think that there's demand for tagging the validation state at IXPs. Why? Because people ask me how to implement it. And I think there's also now a little bit confusion with this RFC 8097 and with this one, because they want to tag communities, and then they see this other draft, and then they see our draft, and they think like, okay, what to do now? Is it that or that? What do I have to do? And so I think this is a little bit unsatisfying situation. So I think it would be best to forward with the draft or finish or drop or whatever, but just do something and not let it dangling around. So I'm happy for any input, ideas, discussion, and yeah.
Jacob Heitz from Cisco. I'm sorry I haven't read that draft recently, but I believe there are 3 validation states, right? Valid, invalid, and not found. Is that correct?
Yes.
There should be a 4th state. This is Sriram's last point. The 4th state is the validation has not been performed.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's also not in this draft. But I think I heard a discussion before what to do if the validation wasn't done. I mean, you could also leave the community out, or yeah.
Well, no, you have to send it again, because if from Sriram's point, right, last one, if the connection to the cache goes away, now it becomes validation not done.
Yeah, yeah.
So you do have to signal that one.
Yeah.
So in our implementation, we do have the 4 states.
Okay.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. I think essentially this has been overtaken by reality in 2 dimensions. The one is, well, okay, it is really questionable whether you want to continue to send routes that you determined to be bad to your customers. I hear you say, yes, you and your friends are essentially doing the dropping. Well, okay, why not lift the burden of doing decisions themselves and coding complex policies from your users and just do it? That's one thing. The other thing is the extended community coding was chosen because the large communities were not yet there. Asking for implementation and use of extended communities means you have to wait about 2 years until the routers roll out implementations for doing the marking and providing the policy primitives, in fact, that actually can make decisions based on what communities are there. Between the time when the router code becomes available in production quality and your users actually deploy it, there may be another delay of 2 to 10 years. With the large communities, you can bet every vendor that would be supporting the new extended community already is supporting the large community. And whatever concerns I have about what you're intending to do with the signaling, I cannot prevent you from inventing your large community scheme, doing exactly what we are doing there, and rolling it out tomorrow. Well, okay, maybe next Monday.
Yeah, okay. Answer to that. I understood that this is the only way we can go with the community. I would have been happy with anything. I think if you see software routers implementing stuff, that is going to happen faster. So if you think about research education, it would still make sense. And we are already 3 years on this draft, so 5 years, don't mind.
This is Sidrops, which is 7 to 10 years is how we do things here. Randy Bush, IJ Narcus. I don't want to get into how many validation. This is not the place to get it, or time to get into validation states. We'll leave that when we talk about Oliver's stuff. But I want to agree with Rudiger. Both the previous draft and this draft, if we're going to use a community signal, should use a large community, not an extended community. And it would be nice if they both used the same community definition, because then the people coding on the router side only have to do one hack. And maybe we should separate vertically and specify the community, and then we can all talk about how we might want to play with it.
memory, NIST, not close enough. Did I understand correctly that you envision a mode of operation where the IXP could offer different services to different clients, right? One was potentially drop invalids, one was just signal it back to me.
Yeah.
Actually, there was three, but I can't remember what the third one would be.
Yeah, just tag everything, drop invalids or drop invalids and unknowns. Yeah. But tagging was the main idea of the draft, like just to show with the community what the state of the validation was. I mean, route servers are doing it nowadays anyways. They're doing the validation, so it would be nice to have it also with the community forward.
Right. So that and maybe the previous draft, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, right? You can opt into whatever service you want out of it. While in some ways, drop invalid seems to be the only origin validation policy that makes sense to me. I don't think we should eliminate the other ones, so I kind of like the idea that you can opt in.
Yeah.
Job Snyder's NTT Communications. What I'm lacking in this draft is the secure by default approach that we try and popularize in Internet engineering. To illustrate with an example, does the prefix 80.81.192/21 mean anything to you? It's the DKIG's peering LAN in Frankfurt.
Yeah, I thought that.
If I understand this idea correctly, you'd be fine if I start announcing /24s from NTT's backbone, as long as I carefully tag them with a special community. And this will not lead to operational issues.
So the peering LAN is not to be announced anyway.
So you created a ROA for your peering LAN?
Probably, maybe, yes. I didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, your colleagues did.
Yeah,
and they specify that the maximum length is 21.
Okay.
But your draft is suggesting that it's fine if I propagate these invalids as long as I tag them with a special community. And what there's a strong disconnect between how operators are deploying RPKI, how they're deploying invalid is reject policies, and what you're suggesting here. I would ask you to abandon this draft. We should not be signaling validation states over eBGP sessions, especially not if it promotes the idea of propagating invalids or dropping unknowns. That makes no sense.
I don't see it like that. I mean, I don't see that it's weakening something that bringing something to the world that isn't there anymore. I just see it like you're standardizing or you're saying something, it should be done like this, and you're notifying people, hey, take care about this, take care about this. I mean, the tagging of stuff has been done anyways at IXPs, and there's communities wobbling around to the whole internet. So, yeah, I think this might be just confusing to people, and other ways they will use the community that has been defined at 8097 probably.
But that's not a transitive community. And in previous versions of the draft, the authors were attempting to use non-transitive extended communities across eBGP sessions, which goes to demonstrate that this idea was never tested in practice because there is no BGP implementations that would propagate that. And that further emphasizes that this is not anchored in reality, in my opinion. We should not be propagating invalids. The IETF should encourage engineers to reject RPKI invalid announcements. And this draft does the opposite, so it weakens the security posture.
I don't see it like that. I mean, we are not saying what people should do with invalids or valids or whatever. They can do whatever they want with them. So
your draft literally says that people must implement the simple tagging mode.
Yeah, okay. This is something that could be changed, but
or let the draft expire like it is now.
It was just the most basic mode, but yeah.
The most insecure mode.
Yeah.
Randy Bush, IJ Anarchist. The trade-off here is whether you act for the IXP member or you give the IXP member more information to act for themselves. Seems fair service. The question, of course, is from the IXP member's point of view, if you listen to that signal, are you outsourcing your security? And for that, we've had the discussion of when you drop the invalid and don't give it to me, I've let you control my security. So I'm counting on you for my routing in the first place. Is this any worse? Trying to signal something, Chris?
Probably running out of time.
Fine, sorry.
So I think we should probably, there's two people standing, we should cut the line at the two people. That includes you, Rudiger, if you're going to go say something. Just think fast.
Doug Montgomery again. So, I personally don't buy all of this outsourcing security. Keep hearing over and over again, right, that people want an incremental way to adopt these technologies. They want to be able to debug them. Even if I'm going to throw invalid on the floor, I might want that signal back to me, and I'll throw it on the floor. At least I can look on my box and understand what happened. I don't think we're in some slippery slope world that signaling this back makes it more likely or less likely that they'll be propagated. So I'm fine with it.
That's at least one extra person coming to the mic than two.
Yeah. We have exchanged. Alexander Azimov, Yandex. So I do remember when this proposal was emerging, and I remember my question that was a couple of years ago. So you do already have filtering. You're already using RPSec. Why don't you try then to mark these invalid routes? And when you're just dropping them, I hope so. Why you are asking for flexibility in raw validation and not asking for flexibility in RPSec? But I'm not suggesting this. Drop invalids.
Okay.
So what's the difference from your operational side?
Yeah. I think for us, we just want to standardize it for all and not for ourselves. So, I think.
So you are not trying to solve your own problems. You are trying to do something good for others.
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I think we tried. I mean, now for us, for the situation also changed. We are dropping the invalids by default, but still it makes sense to forward the state of what else is there, and maybe also for others. So yeah, it has always been like that. So
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
yeah.
If you want to add real value by signaling to your members, consider signaling the guys who sent you invalid stuff and get them informed about that. The other way will should be evaluated under the question how to responsibly act as a network operator.
I just have a quick question for you. Is there any flavor of this solution deployed today in your network? I understand you're trying to standardize this, but have you been deploying any signaling mechanism?
No, yes. I mean, the dropping is done, or it's coming at the network, but this tagging is not going out. But as I understand it correctly, the route server itself is doing it internally. So if you go to a looking glass, for example, you will see that there's some extended communities tagged for IRR validation, and there's also communities tagged for the ORA validation. and but they are not sent out to the peers, I think. So that's just what I saw with the Looking Glass. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Rutger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. What was the name of your slides?
Well, okay. I guess on the first slide, the secret will be revealed. No, that's. Okay. Yeah. Couple of months. No, well, okay. Kind of almost a year ago, I found something quite surprising that seems to have missed in using RPKI for a lot of folks. And in January, the short draft came out that has. Yeah, well, okay, that's explaining it, and let me just go through the ideas. Oops, what's that? Okay, well, okay, that's fine. So overview over the presentation. What is it about? There are some interesting corner cases that need attention. Oh, something went wrong there. Oh, yes. Then I have a couple of questions for the working group, whether we need to do a little bit to add to the draft. Your questions and comments. And I have some ramblings that kind of continue the line of thinking beyond the draft. And I may run out of time in that part. So, we are talking about origin validation-based filtering. And in general, I usually get a little bit annoyed when I recently hear people saying, well, you must deploy RPKI, and they actually have essentially a very specific single thing in mind. Well, okay, maybe they actually are acting on other parts of the game, but the communication to the larger public kind of may confuse the larger public about that there are several different parts, and it would be a good thing to identify exactly what you are talking about. So I'm talking about using the origin validation in filtering policies. And looking closer at that, we find the first order of thinking in the community and for the implementations and deployment has been the idea. Well, okay, I should protect my AS from importing bad stuff, and well, okay, what will be the consequences of doing so? A second order consideration has been around and not gotten as much attention, which is, well, I want to have my own network, my own AS running on clean information, and I'm injecting myself stuff, and so I should take care that I don't introduce into my own network in uncontrolled fashions bad stuff. That turns out to be actually quite tricky. It seems that the idea that you can actually check what you send your partners to the outside also could be checked. And if you think about it, it looks to me like that is, in fact, more important and significant than dealing with the nitty-gritty, very complex and hard to do internal protection. My last comment on the previous talk was, think about what it means that you should be acting responsibly, and that quite certainly includes you should not spread bad information. And the egress policy that you are doing is your last and final point of control where you can prevent spreading bad information. And I guess that in some other networks, things look like in mine, where I can say, yes, the number of routers and configurations that manage the egress are actually fairly small and actually are very rigidly controlled, while the zoo of internal systems and configurations is something like 2 orders of magnitude worse, and the control exercised on the implementations and the configurations also is much harder to do. Say, well, okay, actually, I don't trust what's happening there in many cases. So that's essentially, yeah. If you don't want to think about responsibilities and practices for acting responsibly on your external relations, you still could ask yourself, do you want to embarrass yourself by relying on other parties to do your security? And give you nasty messages about, hey, you are sending me shit all the time, if they choose to actually tell you, or are you kind of even worse, relying if you are making something bad, are you going to rely for the debugging and figuring out stuff on the fact that, well, okay, some of your neighbors may actually drop the bad routes and you figure out, oh, there is inconsistent propagation and, kind of diagnosing your fault the reverse way in something that looks like the worst possible way of tracking down stuff. Applying the origin validation classification for, in the end, dropping the invalids is kind of very straightforward logic for the egress, but one has to be aware of a couple of corner cases that actually have to be explicitly taken care of in the implementation. The essential point is that you have to use the effective origin AS. That's the AS that will be in your announcement post policy for the origin validation classification. And there are corner cases where this may be different from the origin AS that you are seeing in the RIP. And everybody can make the guess that all the implementations that are out there by default, because nobody has been thinking about this, will be looking at the origin as it is found in the RIP. the corner cases happen when you have confederations. And for me, most important, it happens when you use the remove private AS, when you have customers connecting with private AS numbers and you want to prevent the private AS paths to leak out into the public, which should not happen. There are also implementers of BGP might also create weird policy primitives like, well, okay, deliberately manipulating AS path. If that's provided, obviously all bets are off. And potentially things can get interesting if you are processing weird AS paths, essentially say AS paths that mix private and public ASs. That's something that you better should avoid anyway. In the absence of the two weird cases, as far as I can tell, actually the implementation of taking care of the corner cases is fairly easy, because before you do any policy, you already can quite easily predict the final origin AS. Did it? Yeah. Okay, so that's essentially the content of the draft. And the draft is much more terse than me speaking here. And that's a good thing. I wanted to drop a couple of questions whether, well, okay, we really need to add stuff to the simple and short draft. Questions that come to mind: is it necessary to explicitly explain that, yes, this is at this time marked for standards track? Because kind of, I think that's really right. But on the other hand, it does not change the protocol. It just makes explicit that the defined protocol and logic should be available in the correct manner everywhere. No idea, comments on that, I think, would be welcome. And the question dealing with standards track versus informational, experimental, historic, may be of much interest to the AD. Then I wonder, well, okay, is there any need to give some hints to the implementers? Now, we know we have very clever implementers. Unfortunately, sometimes there are also really brain-damaged implementations out there. And kind of from my experience, sometimes one feels it would be not a bad idea to make a little bit more explicit hints about how to do things right. The thing that I feel is really should really be added is a little bit of operational considerations. And the point I see there is that, and that's going to be, I think, not that trivial for the implementers. As an operator, it would be of high value if I can pull the information about which routes I do not announce because they are invalid and dropped, to pull that out easily so that I can go, that I can create a ticket and tell my ops staff, please research where the bad stuff is originating internally. Not not a question like that. A remark. I would really appreciate if I did see reports that someone has actually fixed the an implementation and made it conformant. Kind of requesting, please tell me all the bugs under which you are working on the problem. Wouldn't be bad for me, but you probably don't want to do that kind of publicity. Yes, so that's for now. Before going a little bit on, and if there is time, I would like to go on. This would be nevertheless the time for Randy. You have a question or a comment?
Randy Bush, IJ Anarchist. So first of all, what you're saying is that whatever RFC, origin validation clarifications, it's incomplete. My apologies. Due to the fact that, just a point on your wanting to know what was marked as invalid and dropped. How about SNMP? I believe we do have a MIB that specifically will tell you this.
I think there is no data structure where the dropped announcements outbound are kept and could be retrieved. And
that's right. The RFCs, the MIB is so old, I don't remember. I'd have
to. And anyway, I would be looking for Young anyway.
Yeah. Because I could be what you're catching is the fact that I could be tagging the same announcement with different origins to different peers. So I have to put the semantics of the check on the actual exit to the peer, right? And it could be different for different peers because my policy to Alexander might be different than my policy to Andre. Andre, I leak private ASs. Alexander, I don't.
The assumption that you would be announcing routes with different origin AS would quite clearly, in my thinking, fall under the weird, you obviously are using weird policy primitives with the exception that, yes, if the neighbor is actually private AS and the other neighbor is public, then I will have different origin AS, but kind of the necessary logic for predicting the effective origin AS is in these cases quite simple. If you announce to me origin AS 1 and to Job origin AS 3, you obviously have been manipulating the AS path in ways that you would not agree and that you would not find agreeable, I think.
Each one of those cases can occur. And I could announce to Job something for some policy reason, look at confederations, et cetera, et cetera. They could all happen. My only point is, because they can all happen, and they are valid things, some of them are disgusting, but they're valid. The hack you want is to put the check at the end of the export policy. Period. I don't want to duplicate the policy. I don't want to say, my policy is this, and have the check embedded in the policy, and then have a different policy statement on the actual export, because then we have a consistency problem.
Yeah. Kind of. I think we are in agreement. The point that I am making is actually detecting that you have something where the origin AS may change is in the non-weird cases pretty straightforward, and in the non-weird cases it is pretty straightforward to actually predict the effective AS, the effective origin, and kind of you could even do the decision somewhere in between. It is unfortunately more tricky than I thought in the beginning. Jeff was so kind to explain to me some cases, well, okay. Kind of the important thing is one actually needs to take care of the effective origin, and this may be more or less complicated. But my argument is, unless you are doing something that is completely broken, it can be done. And yes, you are right.
I think it's simpler than that, Rudiger. I think you just put the check at the end of each export. Have it built in, period.
Okay, I think I had something. Yeah, well, okay. Actually, the second bullet actually has a comment that says special primitive apply drop valid after policy. I think that is a way of doing what you are saying.
I think I might prefer to drop invalids.
Oh, yes.
John Scudder. I don't want to take a lot of your time, but since you asked about standard informational, et cetera, since you're telling implementers how to implement the standard, you probably want to make your document say that it updates the standard, which probably means it needs to be a standard, which is fine with me.
Yeah, update the standard, but not the protocol.
Hi, Andrew Gray with Charter Communications. Like the draft, from our perspective, just 2 comments. I would like to see in the proposal, please ask the implementers, make how viewing what got dropped on egress obvious, because we've all seen vendors and their tendency to kind of hide things behind magic. So yeah, I know you had it on the bullet point there. I was reading through the draft. So yes, please put that in there. The other comment I wanted to make is if it would be appropriate to put in here that this should be able to be configured on a per peer or a per neighbor policy as opposed to a global knob. It seems obvious to those of us sitting here probably, but it might be potentially worth a mention from that aspect.
Yes, okay, that's fine. So, okay, then. Okay, the thought process that got me to the surprise that the egress handling has not been taken care of so far also leads to a few other observations and opinions. What I found is that thinking about all of this stuff taught me that I want to have a very clear understanding, definition, documentation of for which of my routes are meant for the DF set and or not for the DF set, not for public consumption. We may have situations where with a particular peer, there is a requirement to leak certain routes that are not meant for DFZ. In a world where you are tagging your stuff, your routing policy information with ROAS, you should make sure that none of the routes that are not meant to go into the DFZ get a ROA. Kind of really not surprising, but kind of making sure that you agree on that with your neighbor and with your own processes and internal communication. Well, okay, it doesn't happen on its own. And there is a consequence for this, because it means for passing on information that should be distributed in a very controlled manner, you cannot use the RPKI ROAS to control it. You really have to bypass that part of your logic and put in special definitions, special policy that allows the exceptions. What hit me on this was just, well, okay, I think one should be prepared to be quite strict on this. Before thinking about it, actually, I tended to be very sloppy about this. And that seems to be a bad idea. Randy, you have something on this?
Randy Bush, IJ Anarchist. I think the second bullet is what the people who did AS0 were trying to get to. If I do not mean to announce that to the default free zone, I probably don't want anybody else announcing it either. So also I have all sorts of funny kinds of neighbors. If you remember, I'm kind of a user of confederations, or was more once upon a time. So that's a kind of ambiguous kind of neighbor.
Yeah, well, okay, kind of. I'm surprised, Randy, that you seem to think that AS0 is something special, and the ROAS for they are not. The only special thing about AS0 is that it cannot occur in real paths, and the ROAS, it is forbidden there, and there are even vendors that don't allow you to put the AS0 into AS path filters because they say it never can happen. You should not be able to filter it. I hope that gets fixed fairly soon.
Let's differentiate between AS0 in a path and AS0 in a road.
Yes, yeah. Well, okay. Kind of. The other thought that I found I wanted to talk about is, well, okay. What does it say? Be prepared to regularly do special case. Oh goodness. This looks like that's a repeat of the previous. Yeah, but kind of the important thing is the second bullet. Thinking about all of this, I figured out in the past there have been quite some people talking about that they want to tweak special views of the RPKI by playing with the certificate system, like local trust anchors and so on. As long as you are using the origin validation classification only for ingress and injection, that may work. if you actually use it for ingress and egress, you will find that for having a tweaked view of the RPKI, essentially allowing stuff that is not included in the public view of the RPKI, and essentially allowing stuff that should never go to the public, you figure out in typical situations, a router, an edge router, has ingress and egress processing. Are we going to ask for split horizon RPKI in the routers? I don't think so. Yeah, that looks to me like insanity, not even the way to insanity. And kind of that's a part, Randy, where indeed some of the clarifications draft stuff maybe falling to the side. So that's oh yeah, and then just a short another one. I am looking at the AS numbers in the RPKI. Thanks to an interesting file maintained by the NRO, I can classify the ASs into ASs that are actually assigned by an RIR to some user network versus ASs that are essentially owned by IANA, and none of the IANA owned ASs should ever float through the public BGP. That includes AS0, that includes AS2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that includes the private ASs, it includes the documentation ASs, it includes the pools that have not been assigned to anyone. And then there is another class that I was a little bit surprised to be able to figure out of the data. That is the ASs that have been assigned by IANA to the rears, but the rears don't assign it to anybody. They may have, there may have been an assignment in the past, or it may be fresh supply of ASs that's sitting in the pools. And the numbers from yesterday are 7,300 routes ASs as total occurring in ROAS. 42 are occurring in actual ROAS that never should show up in the public, and for weird reasons I'm not going to talk about publicly, the AS0 is not even included. And the number of unassigned RIRs is also a quite interesting number. And I think I have some ASs that I own where it would be nice I had a way of publishing. I don't want them seen in the public for now. And all those actually should be kind of purged from the RPKI information that is used when you are doing origin validation. What I am thinking about to do is install a filter between the cryptographic relying party evaluation and the RPKI router, and map all the stuff that should not appear in public to 0. And that prevents that if anybody manages to push out into the wild routes that actually are making use of the unwanted ASs, to be purged from the routing system as far as origin validation drops invalids.
I have an interesting question. The IANA special plus pools, is this a static pool?
And the IANA is delegating blocks of 1,000 ASs once in a while to rears. And that way there is a dynamic, but it is a very low frequency dynamic, while of course the dynamic of rears assigning or taking back things, that is happening about 2 per day or 3 per day. The IANA is happening something like every half year or so.
And the RIR block pools, the same question, is that static?
No, that's kind of highly dynamic, because every assignment that an RIR does withdraws one of the blocked or pools, and every AS that is returned to the RIR also is a transaction.
And a last question. Do you have a suggestion for implementers to say any of this ASs should never be seen inside a routing domain? This
goes, that I'm looking at this goes back to 2 years ago, seeing on Geoff's website, him explaining that all kinds of weird stuff is actually floating in the wild. So this is just the stuff that I'm seeing in the RPKI. If you look into the AS paths that are floating around, you are seeing all that crap. You just are not seeing AS0 show up.
John Scudder. First a question, just to clarify, this is completely unrelated to all the previous slides and the draft, right? This is just because you're hijacking your own talk to talk about this, yeah? Okay. And so I don't know how much time we have for Q&A. I saw Chris looking at his watch, so not a lot, and Job is behind me. So I will just say that that last slide you presented is interesting, thought-provoking. I have a bunch of things to say about it, and I think that it would be useful to either talk about later or, to have a full, session slot for it.
Job Snyder's NTT Communications. Can you go back to the AS number slide?
Okay, yeah.
I think there may be some explanations why you're seeing this. I know of some entities that have attempted to try to validate who the customers they're interacting with by having the customer put private ASNs in ROAS that act as a magic token. So that may be some of it. There can be typos. I know that one of the RERs stopped accepting private ASNs in ROAS, so that can maybe help reduce this type of error.
Yeah.
But I think looking at this, it may be interesting to see if this can be integrated with the open source RPKI cache validators, so that out of the box, this type of garbage wouldn't make it through RTR to the edge routers. And that may be worth pursuing. So thank you for highlighting this.
Yeah. Well, okay. Kind of. It is quite clear, as long as nobody presents this information. Of course, nobody is going to fix the stuff. Quite obviously, the IANA number is high essentially because of private ASs. And yes, well, okay, they should not occur. And you do not want, and that's why I was saying in the previous slide, I want to replace on this one, comment on this one. I want to replace the bad ASs in the ROAS by 0. If people think that, say, using max length is essentially giving hints to bad guys how to attack that could be used as well. Well, okay. Let's keep it there. Actually, the last column where I would like us to be able to say certain ASs that we own should at this time not be publicly used, I think would be an interesting thing, and I think I know where to put it.
Jeff Houston, APNIC. I'm not sure if I'm going to be the bad idea. Jeff Houston, APNIC. I'm not sure if I'm going to be the bad idea fairy or just insanely crazy. But, you know, if you really wanted to understand the validity of an AS number in a rower, why don't you sign with an AS number? Because right now, I can put anything I like in a rower because the signature is the prefix, not the AS. If you're really, really concerned, if you are concerned about the AS and you're concerned about its validity, why are you inventing more stuff when you have a PKI that can talk about it?
Are you suggesting we essentially mimic the RPSS authorization where the address and the AS must meet?
I said I was the bad idea fairy. Yeah, I am.
Well, okay. No, I think I'm quite happy with what I'm seeing here, and actually, this is simple to detect. And if you want to work around and protect yourself, it is also damn simple to install that filter that removes bad stuff. That's
Doug Montgomery. So one question is if you're saying private ASNs and the such, is like the Slurm model, is this ignorance of how it was supposed to be done if you needed to validate these things effectively, or Slurm doesn't work?
Kind of. I haven't thought about whether removing the bad stuff by way of Slurm out of this. Not sure how and whether that works.
No, I'm not saying.
Okay.
The question is, why is this stuff appearing in the global RPKI?
Because
is that ignorance, or that Slurm doesn't work?
I don't think Slurm really gets into the picture. I think it is in many cases a typo and people not thinking about the consequences and having no guideline that they should only put ROAS for routes that they want to see in the DFZ supported in that form. So kind of, if you think about it, there is actually a quite rigid relation between the various points I brought up. But my general thing is observation is this looks essentially like people not knowing what they are doing or being careless. And kind of probably not really a big thing, but it looks like essentially nobody has been looking at the nasty details yet.
I guess as a last comment, I'm a little bit concerned that one-off implementations of validators might take some path here to clean this up. Once again, you know, those who are reluctant constantly point at the ability to diagnose what's going on. So hopefully we would clean this up in some more general way than your filters or one-off validator hacks.
You want to do something as a draft and RFC giving guidelines or a BCP on this? Probably yes.
Randy Bush, IJR, because all this stuff is administrative owners, right? And so if you just give them a little crown so that they can issue the certification necessary to describe their data, this becomes significantly less of a problem. Unfortunately, so it's not really a layer 7 problem at all. It's a layer 9 problem. And I don't think we're going to solve that in this room.
Okay, thank you. I think the end result was somebody wants you to put a presentation together for the next, and probably some discussion on the list with some numbers and actual content. I mean, sorry, that came out wrong. I mean, things like I and R here, they probably want you to say, oh, the ones that are I
Yes.
are this, and this.
Kind of,
this, and this.
kind of. If the numbers had been just a dozen, I would have put them on a slide. 42 or 67 requires a font that is essentially not readable.
Sriram? However, this is not the current agenda. No, you're up. I just was while you were getting ready. I think your slides are correct. If they're not, we can sort that out. Okay. All right. Who knows how this works?
Okay, good morning. So this talk is about doing route analysis of invalid routes, looking into some details regarding what's causing them to be invalid. That kind of an understanding might be useful, especially considering that now operators are getting serious about dropping invalid routes. So this is looking at the global picture. So 20 route views collectors on March 16th. Total of about 7,000 invalid routes. And RV here stands for routable to covered valid, and RNF stands for routable to covered not found. And NR means that the invalid is if you were to drop it, the data traffic would not be routed to anything. So what it shows is that out of these about 7,000 invalid routes, about 77% are, if you were to drop them, about 77% of the data traffic will still get routed to valid routes, which could be less specific. Also, to about 2% get routed to not found, and the 21% are not routable. So that traffic is not routed anywhere; it's lost. That's the global view, and if you just focus on level 3, this is all coming from route views. We are from route views, we are inferring what routes the level 3 receives and forwards them to their peers or to the collector. And this analysis is based on those routes which have actually level 3 AS 3356 in the AS path. So level 3 would see about 4,000 invalid routes. Again, like in the previous slide had actually 79% that are routed to valid or not found. In the case of level 3, so that was global. In the case of level 3, 65% of the invalids are routed to valid or not found, and 35% traffic is lost. AT&T, this is going back to December because I want to talk about before and after. Before and after here means before AT&T started to drop invalid routes from their peers, and after. So that was in early February. So before early February, this actually goes back to December. And also, I also have numbers for after. So before they were dropping, they were seeing about 6,000 invalids back in December. 65% are routable to valid or not found, and 35% are not routable. And after, meaning that after February of early February 2019, they started to drop invalid routes only from peers, not from customers. So they are so from looking at it from AT&T's perspective, they are forwarding 192 invalid routes to the collector or to their peers, of which 91% are routable to either valid or not found less specifics, for example, and 17% traffic is lost. So that's the story on what happens at a high level view in terms of out of the invalids, if you were to drop all of them, for how many prefixes the traffic is still routable to a less specific valid or not found, or the traffic simply lost. So they were AT&T looked at the actual traffic rather than the invalid route behavior, like what we are looking at. And Jay mentioned on NANOG that they saw that very minuscule amount of traffic was being lost when if they were to drop the invalids. And based on that, they decided to go ahead and drop the invalids from the peers, but not from the customers. It's also important to, of course, look at not just the traffic percentage, but also the routes. That's what this is doing, and it also digs deeper into the invalid routes, as you will see in the next few slides. Routes are important because, for what you know, it could be a route belonging to some company that assists with tax preparation and tax submissions, say April 15th, and if their, for example, H&R block, and if their prefix were to be dropped on April 15th, millions of people would be affected by that, even though the traffic may be in the very, very, very low, insignificant in terms of percentage. So I think operators should also consider route analysis and see what might be the likely impact of the due to the routes the invalid routes that they are dropping. So looking at a detailed analysis of the invalid routes over the next few slides, let us get some definitions in place first. Invalid ML route is invalid only due to prefix length greater than max length. Invalid AS route is invalid only due to AS mismatch. And IASML represents route is invalid due to both reasons, max length and AS mismatch. And once we look at the invalids, when we do further deeper analysis of it, we also look at when you are routing the traffic for an invalid route to a less specific, same prefix or a less specific valid or not found. In that case, does the less specific or the same prefix which is valid or not found, does that route have the same origin AS as the invalid route in question? And if the answer to that is no, if it is different, then we also look at whether that different AS happens to be the origin AS of the immediate transit provider of the AS that is propagating the invalid route. So those are some of the details of the analysis of invalid routes in the next few slides. So March 16th data again, the total number of invalids that level 3 sees is about 4,000 ballpark. And on the left, so we first categorize that into invalid max length, invalid AS length, and invalid MLAS. So those are the three categories, and then we dig down into each one of those for the details. So in this slide, so basically you have 93% that are covered by I'm sorry, 93% that are I'm sorry, yeah, and I have to go to the next level, down, one level down further. So I'm looking at the details of the invalid ML. So on the left side, for 64% of those, so those that have max length invalid, 64% of those are covered by routes that are valid, and 17% are covered by routes that are not found. And then at the next level, we ask the question, the valid route that is possibly less specific in this case, does it have the same origin AS as the invalid route? So that means that the traffic is still getting delivered to the AS that originated the invalid route. So that's a good thing. So on the left side, as you move to the left in this diagram at each fork, it's better than moving to the right fork. So that's the general principle here. So again, looking at route in the middle, RNF. So in this case, the invalid ML route the traffic is being routed to a route that is not found. And those are 1%, small number, 17. And of those, again, 13 have the same origin AS, and 4 or 24% have different origin AS. And interestingly, when it is a different origin AS, for all of those cases, the origin AS is the transit provider of the origin AS of the invalid. So again, that's a good thing because you have dropped the invalid route, but the traffic is still going to the transit provider of the AS that originated the invalid route. And hopefully it is getting delivered. So the thing that is lost is on the right, which is NR, so not routable. So 35% of the prefixes are such that you are dropping those invalids, and that traffic is not getting routed anywhere. But one interesting thing in this picture is that the NR is, there are 579 routes that are getting dropped. That is 35% of the prefixes. And the interesting thing is that those are ML invalid, max length invalid, which means that the traffic is going to the correct originating AS. It's just that they misconfigured the ROA. They got the max length wrong. So in this case, perhaps the operator can be considerate and tolerant of these and maybe go ahead and forward the traffic. I'm not sure if operator wants to do that, but if they did it, what would happen is that the traffic is not going to a incorrect or invalid AS. It is going to the valid AS, which has a ROA. It just happened to configure the max length incorrectly. So that's something to think about. Now, this is the digging down deeper into the invalid AS. And again, you can go through a similar analysis. First, look at what is covered by a route that is valid or not found. In this case, one additional detail is that if it is being routed to a valid route, it could be same prefix or less specific. Both are possible in this case because the invalid AS has a wrong AS, but the same prefix has a ROA. The right AS has registered a ROA, so it is routable to the route that is valid and has the same prefix. So that's a good thing, of course, and that's about only 1%. But 99% of the time when you are routing it to valid, it is getting routed to a less specific, and then you can ask all these same questions, a different AS, same AS, and if it's a different AS, is it the same, is it the AS of the transit provider of the invalid? So all these questions are kind of answered through this diagram, which tries to enumerate the different paths that you can follow in looking at the details of the invalid routes. Okay, so the next thing is, we can skip this. This is looking into the detailed analysis of the invalids with max length as well as AS. So we intend to do this analysis and report it through our monitor. So we currently have a RPKI monitor that's been up and running for last few years. The monitor is going through a major upgrade. We should have a monitor 2 in the near future, monitor 2.0, and that will give same kind of results that I presented. It will present it possibly in this sunburst format or sunburst picture, where you can look at like how many invalids and what are all the details once you, I mean, you can actually, this is interactive. You can move your mouse around and look at the details of what's causing something to be invalid, whether it is covered by valid or not found, and if it is the same origin AS as that of the invalid route or a different, and so on. So basically, this tells you that if you are dropping invalids, what percentage of traffic is still making it to a destination AS, which is either the same AS as that of the invalid, or it is their parent, meaning that the transit provider. If those are the situations, then you feel more comfortable about dropping the invalid. And if you are dropping it entirely, and a few of those are, of course, hijacks, which you don't want, I mean, which you are happy to reject. But there are some reasonable percentage out there, like we saw for the max length. For the case of max length, there are 579 or 35%. The traffic actually would go, if you did not drop it, the traffic actually would end up at the correct AS, but that would not happen if you drop it. In this case, it looks harmless, so it's good to get all these insights and look for the monitor 2.0. Hopefully, we'll be able to bring it out in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Andrei Robachevsky. Sriram, thank you for the presentation. This diagram will be generated for any IS? So I should enter IS number and give this diagram on the monitor?
So we need to plan that. We have the data analysis capability. We are using big data analytics. We can give you a global view, or we can give you a view per AS in principle. We need to actually code that in and give you the ability to enter the AS number. I don't think we have quite done it yet, but we can facilitate that. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And George Michelson, who has 2 presentations, not 1. And then Oliver will be up after that. You do the clicking, man. I mean, you can shout clicking if you like.
Resistance is useless!
Which one do you want first?
Sorry, okay, I'll click.
Which one do you want first?
I thought you said shouting was okay.
It is.
Can we do the modified validation first, because it's short?
Sure. Whichever one you want first.
I actually wanted to call this slide The Assassination of Jean-Claude Marat by the inmates of the asylum at Charenton under the direction of the Marquis de Sade, but there wasn't enough room on the slide to put it there. So I am here to talk about deployment of the reconsidered validation model in the resource public key infrastructure, and this is an 01 version of our document. So this is pretty much everything that has to be said. I could stop at this point, but I'll walk it through. So the primary problem is, when we attempted to discuss this last time, the observation was made in the room, no code. It's a fair point. We can't realistically ask for adoption of this activity if we don't have code. So we went and found some code, and we now have running code which implements this form of validation. In the process of thinking about what a deployment might look like, given also a strong opposition in the community to flag days moving completely from one world to another, we're probably going to have to recommend some form of mixed mode operation. So I made a very simple change to the structure of the document to include a tabular view that says, well, in a mixed world, what would it look like? What is the actual meaning of encountering a chain of certificates with different OIDs? What do you do? So I made some clarifying words. And the principal question is, where do we go from here? Okay, so code. Routinator, I love that name. I think going to Krill was really boring. I definitely wanted more innators. But Routinator have actually implemented this thing. We have functioning code out there which will recognize this OID and performs the pruning function in the act of constructing the state of valid prefixes under consideration looking down the certification chain. RIPE NCC actually had this method in a beta of their version 3 code. 3's in a bit of an odd state at the moment. You will have seen on the lists that it's kind of been moving around the space of being able to perform validation. But they actually do have a backlog item to add this mode of validation. And another validator that is under development, but I don't believe I should out who is responsible for that, but another implementation has this model on backlog and will be appearing later in the year. So we now have at least 2 and probably 3 strong indications, but 1 firm implementation. And I have discussed the implementation with other validators, with RP-Stir and with Dragon, but obviously they were non-committal. So in general sense, nobody likes flag days. I don't understand that. It looks like everyone likes driving around periodically with a flag on their car, but no one on the internet likes a flag day. And nobody wants to move over to an entirely different mode. So we're going to have the flag day that isn't a flag day when we flag that we're now in a mixed mode. So the general sense here is that the OID that you find in a certificate has to apply to what you're going to do in the consideration of that certificate. It's set by your parent. Your parent made you. That's what parents are. They make you. And they minted into you an OID. So whatever OID they had in them directed how you validated them. But when you're doing a validation moment of you, your OID was given to you by them. It says what you should do in you. But the point is, it's not a recursive descent. When you come to the next certificate, it's got an OID that you minted into it. So if you were minted as a strict mode, old OID, and you mint a child that is a lax mode, obviously the child should be interpreted in lax mode. Because why else did you put a lax mode OID into it? And once you are in a lax mode OID space and you mint a child, well, it's now a grandchild, with strict mode, that grandchild should be validated with strict mode. Otherwise, why the hell did you mint a strict mode OID in it? It's you. So the table just basically says, at every layer in the pie, the OID determines how you are validated. It's not about your children, it's about you. So, where do we go from here? So we would like to call for adoption. And the fundamental reason is the bottom bullet. The risk issue, the fundamental risk issue that underpins this problem, why we are here, has not gone away. And I know people say, but you did 0/0, but unfortunately the risk doesn't go away because the 0/0 is an assertion about our trust anchor. Our operational states necessarily create products that have literal 3779 lists in them, and they generate substates which all of you inherit. The risk hasn't gone away, and it was never just our risk. This is a generalized community risk. Now, there are disagreements in this room about the extent to which we should allow lawyers in the room, but nonetheless, we have a clear sense of an emergent risk, and it has lawyered up on us. We have been given a sense it's a global third-party risk, and we're exceptionally uncomfortable about operating a public infrastructure benefit outcome facing global routing that has this risk. We need this. But essentially, it's the community's decision. We can't do an imposition. That isn't how it works. The community's got to decide if it wants to move, and the community's got to decide when to move. But we would really like adoption of this draft so we can have a grown-up conversation about it. That's it.
Hi, George.
Can I shout again?
Almost. Rob Ostein, Arcus DRL.
Hi, Rob.
So I will skip over the I do not agree with the lawyering up thing, but let's just give that a miss because we've had that fight in this room too many times already. The check it at every level thing, I'm not sure that works technically without retroactively going back and rewriting all the already deployed code.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's really practical because I don't have a time machine.
Yeah.
So I'm skeptical. No offense.
Well, I said it's a flag day without having a flag day, but actually it is a flag day. It's an unavoidable consequence, and you can't use RIP on public global routing anymore. You have to speak BGP. We do these transitions. It happens.
Hi, George.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi, as a developer of the Reliant Party software RP Stir, I can share you something like the RP Stir has been ready to support the validation reconsider, but we don't use the new OID right now. We just write the algorithm to support the validation reconsider, but we don't use the OID as a trigger. So we expect we can switch to the new validation reconsider very smooth and quick.
I do appreciate it, but I did not want to put an obligation on you because you never formally said we can and will. You just said it's up for discussion, and you know that's reasonable.
Yes.
People don't have to commit in this space because we have implementations. If the community decides to move there, we all have to do it, but we're in the conversation.
Yeah. So in short, I support the adoption of this document.
Thank you. What would you like to do? Okay, we're going to the next one. Hooray! More from me. Here is some new work. Now, I wish I'd put this into IEPG because this is not about BGP. And we were told that there was to be no BGP in IEPG, so this should have been there. But nonetheless, it's here. Okay, we have been working on a mechanism that is designed to allow strong, trustable assertions to be made about internet number resources, about anything, unconstrained statements. I wish to buy a hamburger from Denny's. I have network 10 and I can prove it. That's what we want to be able to do. And tomorrow it's Arby's. I can prove that too. And nobody can limit what I can say, but I can prove I have network 10 when I say it. And we want it to be totally self-contained. And the reason is, I don't want the world to know that I'm going to Arby's. I want that to be private. So I need to be able to prove I've got network 10, but it's between me and the man with the cash till at Arby's. No one else needs to know. It's private. So this is a self-contained mechanism. Now, the other thing is, I'm going out for burger with my buddy, and he's got network 9. And we want to say we're going to have burgers with network 9 and 10, and we both want to sign. And if neither one of us shows, that's not cool. But if one of us shows, that's not cool. But if both of us show, that is enormously cool. So we need to be able to say a signing outcome that has both of us as a required membership and both of our resources. So it's multi-signing, multi-party. You can get a superset outcome. And it's unconstrained what is signed. You want to sign over a Greek salad? You can do that. It's not just about burgers. So we went to Russ Housley, the guardian of all things OID, and we said, can we get an OID in the space? And he said, sure, and he gave us one. So we are not talking about routing or routing, either of them. We are talking about the business-to-business activity that takes place outside of BGP that is classic provisioning, okay? And that, to my mind, is quintessentially a private matter. I'm in a contract with someone in Deutsche Telekom talking to them about doing amazing stuff, and I'm thinking I need to go and do business with a competitor like Liberty Global. I don't want to publish that in the world. I'm in a contract negotiation. It's private. And I'm entitled to do stuff privately, business to business with Liberty Global, and have a way of proving I'm the one in control of the resource. I mean, I know it's not very fair for Deutsche Telekom that I'm going to pull the contract, but this is business. It's private. but I still need to be able to show control and ownership of the resources. And we think there is a lot of private business that can benefit from the ability to prove transactional control over the resource. And we want to put trust into business. Now, you can model a whole lot of stuff with this because we have tried to design a fully general mechanism. It does not specify what is signed, and in particular, it does not specify the semantic intent. What is the applicability of the internet resources to the thing that's being signed on? I have no idea. And it doesn't say how to apply them to derive that semantic intent. I don't know. I can't know. It's private because I want to be taken out of that conversation. I don't want a rigorous validation definition in me about what it means. I just want to be able to say the address part, the AS part, is provable, but what it means is private between the consenting parties. So how did we do it? That's just CMS. So initially, we actually did this a few years back, about 7 years back, using some homebrew ASN1, and we made zip files. It was awful. I mean, it was terrible. And Russ, who is a very nice man, said, you're wasting your time. Do this as CMS because CMS has a model for doing detached signature signing, and it encompasses almost everything you need. So we have defined a CMS object which has all the extra components in ASN1 to add in the key identifiers of the must-be present signers and the 3779 list of the resources that should be asserted. And we also included the bag concept, get all the 509 covering componentry to the trust anchor and include it in the object. Because then you get standalone validation. You don't need to go to a repository because you've got everything in the signing path between the trust anchor and this EE certificate. It's all there. So it doesn't have to be in the repository to be validated. You could put it there if you want to. So you get a certificate or you get a set. You get them to contain the resources. You could use a superset certificate with everything. You can narrow it down because there's a list of the applicable resources. You get a checksum, you sign over the checksum, you sign over the metadata, you're done. That's it. So for validation, you use the bag to do path construction, you validate the chain cert to the EE cert, you can then prove signature on the object against a valid cert, and then you get the thing out of band to perform that check. We do not specify how you get the third data, and we can't do the applicability because it's out of scope. Okay, so you could use it in bring your own provisioning. This is the classic need. Large enterprises are currently using HTTP REST with JSON. They're performing provisioning and they've reached a point where they need to know you control the resource, but they don't know what origin AS you're going to use. So a rower at this point won't fly because the AS is in their hands when they decide how they're going to provision you as a customer. Can't use a rower. In any case, the rower has no field to tag who the hell you are in a business moment to perform the business mechanism if you submit. But if you use our mechanism, you get this, you make a JSON blob, you REST serve it back up, it just flies. It's very slow friction to do this. So we have another idea, which is that you take the current letter of authority, the PDF file that we all forge whenever we want to say that we have control of a resource, and now you digitally sign it. So you can still ship the PDF with your nice minted letterhead saying that I work for the NSA, please route my prefixes, but you've got a digisig to go with it. And we think, again, it's minimally invasive on the process to do that. So we also think that you could have any idea. I mean, anything, we don't care, test an idea. And we actually have talked with operators, if you had an ability to do this instead of some of the stuff that you're doing at the moment, like put it in a WHOIS record, would you do this? And they said yes, they would. We got strong indications of motivation from CDNs, large providers, for this class of mechanism. And we think it's a no-brainer. We have code. Oh, I thought this was the newer slides. I wasn't going to tell you that. So we have code. And it's available as an online demo, and there's code available as well. So you get a page where you get to stipulate the resources that are available, you get to sub-specify, you nominate the resource set, you give the document, it generates a downloadable object that you then pass to someone. They perform verification by getting two objects, the thing that's under consideration and the blob, and then they come up with a validation moment saying, yep, the signature checks out, here's the things that are associated, what do you want to do? you can run it. So we also did code mods in Dragon, and the reason is we have to be able to extract an EE certificate to perform this function. And we wrote basically a commit pull request, but we don't feel like it's appropriate for submission because it's just a horrible hack, and you would want to do it cleanly, right? I mean, we don't want to overreach here, but we did actually use Dragon to do the key extraction. So we want adoption. We think this is useful, and we think the community is ready, and we want to encourage the business community to do this in things like BYO. But to do that, we actually have to have a commitment that we're going to permit either CSR request, classic certificate sign request, to be given an EE cert, not a CA cert, so not up down. This is not up down. This is give me a thing I can do some signing with, but I won't be a CA. We need that. Or we need export of the private key from inside a portal, which is, I mean, nobody wants to do PKCS 15 or PKCS 12 wrap. That is horrible. Key export, don't do that, but we need it. Or we need it embedded inside the mechanisms to do the generation. But that's what we'd like to do, stepping away from the microphone.
Rob Osstein, I just have one
Just a note, super quick, one comment, that's all we got time for. Oliver's going to run out otherwise.
Yep. Congratulations, George. You invented the GXTRR for the RPKI.
Hey, Job.
Yeah, I would like to see this move forward. This is useful. It has applications in the real world, and the current solutions are horrible. So, thanks.
I had the right slides. Don't actually have those.
They're not online.
They are. Sorry.
Okay. So I'm Oliver Borchert, NIST. I can make this fairly quick. What we propose is validation signaling in BGP-SEC. So we wrote already up a little draft. I just uploaded it maybe an hour ago. So if you want to read it, it's pretty much the same like the RPKI origin validation, just on the BGP-SEC side. So what can you do? Why would you do that? Especially in BGP-SEC, you can defer validation, and there it makes sense, especially within IBGP peers, that if you have on the edge the BGP-SEC path validation, you send it to your internal peers, and they basically can then, for example, low pref or up pref the validation depending on the peer. So I could, for example, say I first validate everything coming in via eBGP before I validate anything that comes in through IBGP. Or I could even defer it completely. So just to go back to RFC 8205, and there is explicitly said that you are allowed to defer validation. Yeah. There's another part in the RFC that is interesting. The RFC says that, however, an implementation should ensure that deferment of validation and status of deferred messages is visible to the operator. And that goes a little bit back to the presentation I gave at last IETF with the unverified. BGP-SEC currently only has two validation states, valid and invalid. If I defer a validation, I don't have a validation state. So having the unverified in the validations or as a marker to this update, what I also think is very important in RPKI origin validation, but especially in BGP-SEC path validation where it is specified in the draft but somehow omitted. So we actually had just recently a working group adoption call for most drafts what we propose for APK origin validation and BGP path validation with the unverified flag. Yeah, so questions? Yeah, okay, so I think then I will send to the list soon adoption call. Okay. Thanks.
All done. Thanks. Bye. See you the next place, not the last place. Oh, I don't know. We will have the proof. I went into some place that I archived away. And I was like, oh, I never saw your mail. This is no big deal. I mean, I suppose I'm a little sympathetic to Joe Q that I think a bunch of stuff is kind of moved forward and I think there's some reluctance, like at this point, to some extent, you'd like to say we're moving validation forward in the future, so we don't have to. We're not relying upon the route server to do that. And I think it's actually a good idea for the route servers to just drop the validation. I think it might be useful if they displayed that in some fashion.